Welcome to Divisionalysis. I'm Fog. This build that I'm wearing with preservation on the weapon can delete a named enemy in under a second. What would you like to know? I guarantee whatever you just asked yourself in your head is the wrong question to ask. Let's go. It's not your fault that you're asking the wrong questions. It's content creators' fault. And that includes me. And I know that I'm wrong, so maybe I'm even more to blame. But the truth is that content creators have told you a lie. Well, it's not really lying because I'm pretty sure they believe it's truth. But the fact of the matter is when a content creator puts these three letters on the screen, it is not damage per second. It's not even close. It is potential damage per second. And it comes with numerous asterisks associated with it. And those asterisks are the difference between what gets shown on the screen and what you actually do in game, as in what your actual DPS is. Here's my test build, and we're in the range, and I'm just going to do a DPS check. Okay. 5.956 million damage per second. We'll call it range burst DPS. And here is 16 seconds of gameplay footage. Watch closely. So I sat frame by frame, 0.01 seconds at a time, and collected all of the damage numbers that were recorded in that 16-second window. The three large lines that you can see at the beginning with a yellow outline are actually explosions that occur on the controller's weak point. So they will artificially inflate the DPS numbers, but it doesn't matter. These are the damage numbers that were collected. This is what the range burst DPS average was showing. So burst DPS, remember, 5.9 something million, and this is the average DPS that was achieved during the time of those 16 seconds. What you have been told is DPS is not DPS, and this is probably the first time ever. This is the actual damage per second. And I think this is, I mean, how long has the game been going? But I think this is literally the very first time that you will have ever seen what actual DPS looks like. So over that 16-second window, this is what the actual DPS looked like, and the orange is the average DPS achieved. So what we saw in the range, or what a burst DPS calculation would tell us, is in fact some 70% away from what you're actually achieving in game. And it's forced us to focus on the wrong areas, because everybody wants to have that clickbait next highest DPS number. And there are a number of reasons why this is the wrong area to focus on. DPS is not one-dimensional. Before I explain further, there's another mistake that people make. And that is that all DPS is not created equal. So the next mistake that people make is confusing damage with effect. The effect that we're trying to achieve is to eliminate targets. Here we have the same build, the same weapon, the same damage per second, the same enemy, the same accuracy, and yet one is able to have an effect much quicker than the other. The same DPS, both calculated and measured, produced different effects because of the choice of application of that damage. If you are not forced to shoot a heavy in the head, shoot him in the leg. The helmet and the torso of a heavy have 30% more HP than the limbs do. So not all DPS is created equal, even though the numbers would tell you otherwise. And that comes down to how you choose to apply it. But there are some times where the game forces you to apply it in a certain way. Now, this is an example of both forced application and confusing damage with effect. The effect that we're trying to achieve is to kill this chunga. I've already hit him with about 6 mortars from my mortar turret, so I've consistently been doing damage, but the game forces me to apply that damage to every single one of his armor plates equally. And because of that, it takes me some 10 mortar rounds, at which point every single one of his armor plates explodes simultaneously, and then I can get to the effect that I wanted to achieve with a single mortar round. So we've got DPS that you've seen isn't actually DPS. We've got the game forces you to apply it in ways that make your DPS less effective. You choose ways in which make your DPS less effective. What about if I told you that all your damage isn't used? Now what does this have to do with assault rifles? Well, assault rifles, you are forced to apply damage in chunks. Those chunks are rounds. Now I've introduced the first bullet principle before, where a higher damage weapon starts with a head start. Now you get to see where that damage gets given back. Every single weapon will overkill the enemy. The last bullet that you fire to kill an enemy will waste some of its damage. In the case of the FAMAS, killing this red bar enemy, to the body it's maybe 1 in every 13 shots. You're going to lose on average 50% damage from that last shot, which means that you're losing roughly 4% of your damage. No, big deal. What do you do? But 4% of never realizing the potential of that number that you calculated. And if you've ever done the old burst DPS calculation and wondered why you couldn't get a correct prediction in the shooting range, it's because of those two things, first and last bullet principle. And although it makes a minor difference for SMGs and assault rifles, where it makes a major difference is in high base damage weapons. You're forced to apply damage in larger chunks. And what that means is that you will lose considerably more of that DPS that you calculated, your potential. You're losing that and leaving it on the floor. So even when you are in fact impacting with a bullet, damage is disappearing from that calculation that you did. with this shotgun, it doesn't matter that there's a sliver of health left. I am still forced to apply all 8 pellets at once. In the case of the Super 90 killing these red bars, it's losing up to 49% of its DPS into the ether. And the same principle of overkill. Essentially that's what we're doing, overkill. It applies to headhunter builds. Obviously the damage is extremely high with every single chunk that you're delivering. But the same applies for skill builds. And with this first skill build, I have glass cannon on. And it takes 2 mortar rounds to kill an elite. I kill every single purple and red in a single mortar round, and I kill every elite in 2 mortar rounds. But as you'll notice, when I have to fire that second round, there is a large amount of damage that is going into the ether. Now if I exchange glass cannon for calculated, I have 25% less damage. But the effect is exactly the same. One mortar round will kill a red bar, and it will kill a veteran, except this time it's the bleed that will kill them. And it still takes 2 mortar rounds to kill an elite. There is no difference to the effect, even though I have 25% less damage. But now I can exchange the glass cannon for the same effect, but now I get an extra benefit in that I have seeker mines that come back far more regularly. So there's 2 lessons here. The damage that I'm doing isn't having the effect that I want. An extra 25% damage didn't have the effect that I desired, which was killing things quicker. And with the seeker mines, although they're going to do slightly less damage, because I increased the frequency with which they do damage, I'm able to do more damage. Now, most people will get that when it comes to the skill build. But for some reason, even content creators, because they've looked at these DPS or burst DPS calculations for so long, it doesn't compute for them when it comes to a weapon. People use the FAMAS because we've all been told that it's the highest burst DPS weapon. But what's the effect that we're trying to achieve? It's kill things quicker. And when you have a red build on, the difference between 2 weapon systems and their time to kill an enemy is minuscule. Absolutely minuscule. The effect that you're actually achieving with the extra damage pales in comparison to if you can do that damage with more frequency. So the wrong question to be asking is how much damage are you doing? Just as important, if not more important, is how frequently you can do that damage. So I'm going to compare 2 weapons the same, virtually the same. 2 FAMAS, one's got fast hands, the other has in sync. I'm running a turret on the other side of the range to activate 30% additional weapon damage to the in-sync FAMAS. And now a weapon with no additional damage just the ability to deliver that damage more frequently. It's a full second faster. So as you can tell, there are numerous factors that affect your ability to deliver not only damage, but your potential damage. So let's see if you're paying attention. Let's go to the age-old question of Fox's Prayer versus Fenris. Here I've got my Fox's Prayer on. I'm just going to get some damage numbers. Just have to reset that to the Coyote's buff being closest. So now we'll look at the numbers. Okay, 358, 679 for a crit. 358, 679, and 148276 for a non-crit. 148276, yep, confirmed. Now let's swap over to Fenris. Now it's going to include 10% weapon damage from Fenris. But I'm not getting the out of cover bonus. 144105 is the non-crit, and 348589. Okay, so looks like Fox's Prayer are better. But sometimes doing a smaller number more often leads to more damage. And here we can see 55% crit chance. And if we go back to the Fox's Prayer, 49%. So I'm delivering a critical hit 6% more often than with the Fox's Prayer. And if you do the numbers, Fenris is just straight up better without even considering applicability of outer cover. So there's a few things we can take away from this. One, although the critical hit damage number was smaller, because we were able to do it with a greater frequency, we've produced more damage. Two, applicability of Fox's Prayer actually means that that number is even lower. 82% of the time at heroic level is what that number will actually apply. So again, you're going to lose that potential damage 18% of the time. And the third thing to take away from this is actually hidden from you. It's one of the key points, and that is that focusing on that larger number that Fenris produced and focusing just on those 3 letters, it's a bigger number, but it doesn't tell you what you sacrificed in order to get that bigger number. And in this case, by exchanging Fenris for Fox's Prayer, we now don't have as much out of cover damage on our shotgun. And the shotgun is actually doing less damage. So which is going to be better depends on how often I use that shotgun. But because we were focusing on that bigger number, we didn't realize what we'd lost. And that is where we've been led down the garden path. So in this part 1, I've shown you how what you're told is DPS is not actually DPS, and I would think that 99.9% of you have actually seen what DPS actually looks like for the very first time. I've shown you how not all DPS is created equal. I've shown you how factors about how you choose to apply it and how the game makes you apply it have a drastic impact on the effect. And I've also shown you how you can often confuse damage with the effect that you're trying to achieve. And I've also shown you 2 of the right questions to start asking. One is, how often can I do that damage? And the second one is, what did I sacrifice in order to get that damage? In part 2, I will show you a new way of looking at DPS, and once you've seen it, the questions, or the right questions to start asking, become much more straightforward. And then once you start answering those questions, you will find new and interesting ways of achieving that with your building. If you like, then like. If you want to see more, subscribe. But I will see you in the next one. Fog out.